Welcome to episode 3 of our series on networking and personal branding. Today, in this third episode, we're going to talk about content creation and engagement. And this is a topic that many people find a bit intimidating, even if they're already somewhat active on LinkedIn. But it's very important because this is where you're going to start to create your brand. Now, so far, we've built a profile, which helps. We've built a network, which helps a little bit more, especially if you're engaging actively with that network and keeping it active. But once you start putting yourself out there, putting your thoughts and professional expressions out for public consumption, this is when you're going to become a brand and people are going to start knowing you for that expertise that you have. It's estimated that over 90% of LinkedIn account holders are bystanders. They are consumers. They come on the platform and they only read what others produce, maybe click a like every once in a while, but they don't put anything out themselves. The connection requests that I get, generally, if there's no message that comes in, I look at their content and they're not producing content either. And this makes me sad. I think that so many people have a voice that is worthwhile, especially in tech, especially in data. People tend to be afraid to put their voice out there, and I really want to dispel that and make sure that people know that it's a safe space. You can really set yourself apart by creating content, and once you do, that's going to start yielding a following for you and making you a known name, a brand, and even an influencer. I have friends and connections on LinkedIn who got jobs at Google, Amazon, and Facebook. And those opportunities were created based on the content that they put out on LinkedIn and establishing themselves as a personal brand. Those FANG companies reached out to them to get them to interview because their content was that good. When it comes to content creation, I recommend a crawl, walk, run approach. Now you're going to start with the crawl phase, obviously the easiest of the three. Start with making comments. Anybody can make a comment on somebody else's post. Now I advise you at first, if you're a little timid, make them simple, but make them thoughtful. Productive comments are 8 words or more. This feeds the LinkedIn algorithm and promotes the post for that author. You should respond to specific things in the source content. Don't just say, great post, or I agree 100%. This does almost nothing for the author of the post and really doesn't promote the post much. Comment on something specific. Tell them what you thought of it. Ask questions that will further a discussion, because that's what really promotes that content, is getting a back and forth of comment, and response. What I'm going to recommend to you, be brave. It's not Twitter. People aren't generally mean on LinkedIn. They don't go overboard to judge each other and make nasty comments. It's a respectful environment. Most people there are pretty professional. So you can be a bit more brave in your content creation on LinkedIn than you might be on another platform. You want to engage on other people's posts with the same thoughtfulness that you eventually will post yourself. Use comments to express your own thoughts. If somebody spurs something in you, you don't necessarily have to just comment on what they said or ask them a question. You can start talking on your own, and actually there's quite a bit of space. I believe it's 1,250 characters in a comment, so you can write a fair bit in there, and then you start establishing your own brand. You give yourself ideas for your own posts. People appreciate it when you give them a thoughtful response to their content. Dovetail off of their post with a yes and then a thought of your own, or have you thought about, and then introduce your own point into the conversation. That can be a very useful way to spur it forward. Don't be what I call a like machine. You don't want to scroll through your feed clicking like on everything that your friends post or interesting memes that you see or that sort of thing. That can become very repetitive. Those likes tend to get spread around and it can get very annoying. People start tuning you out after a while if that's the only thing you contribute. Don't be that person. There are plenty of other reactions other than like, and I recommend that you make a comment if you really do enjoy something. Next, we're going to get into the walk phase, and this is where we're going to start creating original posts. And I know this can be a bit intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. You can start small. For original posts, you have either 1,300 or 3,000 character limit, depending on how you've oriented your profile, which we won't get into. But that's really a lot of space. You can write quite a bit even in 1,300 characters. But there's no need to fill it all. And in fact, if you try and do that, generally you're going to wind up overwriting and people will get bored reading you. Start simple. Just express professionally oriented thoughts and observations. What happened to you at work today? Don't embarrass yourself or your boss or your company, but professional situations that you found yourself in. Ask people questions. What would they do in this scenario? Now, I'm going to give you one caveat, and it's something that I see far too much, especially for my Indian connections. View my verified achievement from Coursera, Google, IBM, what have you, is not content creation. That is an auto-generated post. It can get you a lot of likes, plenty of slaps on the back, and a couple of congratulations comments. However, this is not you creating content, and people won't remember you for that. So I would avoid that being the bulk of your content. The other thing is, you don't want your first ever original post to be, I just got fired and I need a job. If people don't know you and don't know your content, they're unlikely to respond real well to that first post. There's other easy things, low-hanging fruit that you can do for original posts. You can curate content for others. What classes are you taking? What professional book did you just read? What YouTube video did you just watch? Was it any good? Sometimes people don't necessarily want to commit to a Udemy course or a Coursera course unless someone that they know and trust is recommending it to them. If you go on LinkedIn and say, I just took this course and let me tell you about it, that's going to be some very popular content from people in your industry and in your profession. Now we're going to get into what I call the run phase. And the run phase is where you're going to start optimizing your content with relation to the LinkedIn algorithm. Now, I can talk for hours and hours about the LinkedIn algorithm, but I don't have time to do that here. However, the LinkedIn algorithm is what governs the promotion or lack of promotion for all content on LinkedIn. If you write something that violates one of the principles of the algorithm, you will notice that your post goes nowhere. Nobody sees it, nobody reacts to it, and that's because you've done something that doesn't jibe with the algorithm. So when you start running and you start creating your own content, now you're going to optimize it so that it gets the maximum number of views, reactions, and comments, and you become a bigger brand. Now, we'll start with daily content is the secret sauce. If you post once a day, every day, that will give you the maximum effect. When you post multiple times a day, your content gets depressed within the algorithm and you'll get less looks. Plus, it's kind of hard to come up with content more than once a day if it's original. One post a day gets maximum distribution and keeps your content at the top of other people's feeds, those in your network. The second thing I'm going to tell you is don't share posts. It can be very quick and easy when you see a good post that someone else has put up to just click that share button, maybe put a comment of yours at the top, maybe not, but just have that be your content. This does not work with the LinkedIn algorithm because the algorithm rewards original content. LinkedIn is not interested in people clicking share and forward like you do on Facebook. That's not original. You should avoid linking off platforms off of LinkedIn in the body of the post. LinkedIn's interest is in keeping you on the platform. So when you take a YouTube video and link it directly into LinkedIn, you will see that it won't get a lot of views or likes because LinkedIn doesn't promote that. They don't want people going off of LinkedIn onto YouTube or Twitter, Facebook, or what have you. Again, post original content. And trust me on this, I'm going to tell you something and you may not believe it, but your story is interesting. And it's interesting almost solely by the fact that you've got the guts to share it. If you're putting out original content, talking about your professional journey and what you're doing, you are interesting and people will follow you. Trust me on this, I know. Once you've posted a post and you want to maximize the exposure of it and the distribution, you've got to what I call curate the post. And what I mean by that is when people start responding to it, if someone makes a comment, you should go on there, maybe not immediately, but a little while thereafter, and respond to them. Try and spur the conversation forward. If they've asked a question, answer it, and then maybe ask them a question back. That's when you get maximum promotion on your post, is when people are commenting and you're commenting back to them and it spurs a conversation. You want to grab the audience within those first 3 to 5 lines because that's what's going to appear above the see more button. That's when you start getting views. So if you put something boring in the first 3 to 5 lines, then people aren't going to want to look at your post and it won't matter anyway. Now you want to space out your text. This sometimes gets called broetry and it gets a bad rap, but it draws the eyes down the page. It's a natural thing, and it makes your post easier to read. If you do that, more people will read through to the end. And then the real run phase is attaching media for effect. Photos, videos, anything that's going to add to the impact, make your post a little more eye-catching. Remember that less is generally more. Shorter videos, 1, 2, maybe 3 pictures, anything that will appear on the page, and make people want to read your stuff. Once you start creating content, it becomes very addictive. Once you start getting responses and getting more connections and people following you, and you create a brand, you're really going to want to keep going with it. And I've found that in the past year, I almost always have something to say every day on LinkedIn. You got to make sure it's productive and professional, and you got to make sure it's resonating with your audience for maximum effect. If you put a post out and it gets no views and no reactions, you're going to want to figure out why. It didn't resonate with your audience for some reason, or it didn't resonate with the algorithm. So it can be a very interesting social experimentation stage on LinkedIn if you use it that way. I urge you to get out there. I urge you to start creating content and create your brand, because it will pay dividends for you. Now, I'll see you for our 4th episode when we're going to talk about developing and displaying your work portfolio.